Welcome back to the fourth video in our copper chain making series. Today we're going to be looking at something called the 4-in-1 pattern, which is a pattern that looks kind of like this. And this is a pattern that you can just kind of keep continuing, and you could make a full sheet of chainmail out of it. And for this, we're just going to be using our 14 gauge wire cutoffs and stripping the casing off so that we have a nice clean bare copper wire to work with. I'll just do a quick review of how to make the little copper jump rings using our long piece of bare copper wire. But if you want a more in-depth tutorial, head back to the first video in this copper chain making series, the 3-in-2 pattern. So to make the copper jump rings, we're just going to take our piece of doweling or some metal round bar here, take our long piece of copper, just hold one end, and then just wrap it around the copper, keeping the coils as tight as possible all the way around until you get to the end of the wire. It doesn't take too long. Then you just bend it back, loosen it a little bit, pull it off like that. We're just going to pull that apart so there's a little bit of a gap between each one. And then we're going to use our side cutters to clip the rings off. Get rid of that first little piece, and then you're just going to cut straight through the coil, keeping the line the same so that each ring is pretty much the same size. Now you're going to need a lot of rings for this 4-in-1 pattern. If you want any kind of decent size piece of chainmail, you're going to be several hundred rings probably. So I've got a pile here of about 100 rings, so I'm going to get started. Now for this pattern, we're going to make a slightly different holder. The holder looks like this. We have a piece of round bar, thin piece of metal, and it slides in and out. And how this pattern works is we're going to slip a bunch of rings over top of this bar, however wide we want the sheet to be, and then that's what we're going to work from. It's almost like we're knitting or something. So for example, this sheet that I made earlier, this is 25 rings in this direction and 7 rings in this direction. So that's 175 rings just for this one sheet. And you need to decide what kind of shape you want to do. You can do one that's like this, and of course you can build it longer in that direction, or maybe you just want to make a square, or maybe you want to make a long, thin piece. It's totally up to you. The first thing to do is to decide how many rings wide you want your piece to be. And you can actually add to it later if you like, but it's good to have a general idea of how long you want the piece to be. I'm going to start with 12 rings wide, which is about half of what I have here. So you need to take 12 rings and use your needle nose pliers and close them up so that you have 12 rings that are nice and closed and ready to go. So take your rings, take the bar out, slide your closed up rings onto the little holder, and then slide the bar back over. So how this next row works is you take a single ring and you attach it to the first ring on your rack and close it up. And then you take another ring and you attach it to the first and second one, going in the same direction as that ring that you just put on. And then you grab a third ring and you attach it to the third and fourth ring, or the second and third ring. And then you grab another ring and you attach it to the fourth and the third, always going through in the same direction so that all the rings are falling the same way. So I'm just going to go through the fifth and then the fourth. And then another ring going through the sixth and the fifth. Like that. And we'll quickly just finish up the first row. So now you can see each ring is going and it's kind of, they're overlapping like this. One and one and one and one. They're all overlapping in the same direction, and each of the rings goes through 2 of the rings. This one goes through first and second, second, third, third, fourth, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and so on until you get to the end. Now we're going to start the next row. For the next row, we're going to come back in the opposite direction. For this row, we're going to start here and move in that direction. And I'm going to start by putting a single ring on that first ring in the second row down. And then my next ring is going to go through the first and the second. And then my next ring is going to go through the third and the second. And so on, all the way down the row back in the opposite direction. And working back the other way, we just finish up the third row, again making sure all the rings are overlapping in the same direction. So after 3 rows, we are starting the pattern again. And what you need to remember is when you put the beginning of the 4th row in, you need to start again with another single ring, and then have the second ring that you put on running through the first and second rings. If you don't do this, what will end up happening is your sheet will end up sort of tapering to a point, which is okay if that's what you want. One of the biggest tricks to remember as you work is to continue to make sure that each ring goes through in the same direction as the ring before it, so that on each row, all of the rings are kind of either in that way or in that orientation. They're all either this way or that way. Otherwise, it will definitely look funny. You'll take it off your rack and you'll spread it out, and you'll immediately think that something's wrong with it because you've put the rings in back and forth. So at this point, it's 12 rings wide this way, and we've done 5 rows in this direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to quickly do one more row, and then we're going to take a look at it. So I now have a sheet of chainmail that's 12 rings wide this way by 6 rows deep that way. Let's take a look. We'll take this off our holder and we'll see what it looks like. One of the neat things is you kind of pull this thing out when you're done. Okay, so that's about how big it is at this point. I would say it's a little bit short for a bracelet at this point, but it's still looking pretty cool. And if I wanted it to be wider, I could build more rows out that way. And to be longer, I'd need to do more than 12 rings in this direction. And if you wanted it to look denser, you could double up on each of those rings. So if each ring was doubled, the whole chainmail thing would look a lot denser. I hope you enjoyed this video on copper chain making, the 4-in-1 pattern, or how to make sheet chainmail that looks like that. And of course, like I said, you can make it as wide or as long as you like. And if you wanted the pattern to look a little thicker, a little more dense, you could double up each ring as you're going. Hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the other 3 videos I have on copper chain making with various different patterns, and see you on the next one.